The Pruitt-Igoe housing project, a groundbreaking endeavor in urban design, rose in St. Louis, Missouri during the late 1950s under the ambitious vision of architect Minoru Yamasaki. He dreamed of creating not just living spaces, but a community that would embody modernist ideals of functionality, harmony, and social integration. At first glance, Pruitt-Igoe was a shining example of what could be achieved when design met the needs of the urban poor. A series of elegantly designed high-rise buildings interconnected by green spaces, featuring expansive windows that flooded the interiors with natural light. The intention was clear: to offer a fresh start for thousands who had been marginalized and to rekindle the American dream in the hearts of the city's citizens. Yamasaki, whose later work included the World Trade Center, believed in the transformative power of architecture, not merely in its aesthetic appeal, but as a catalyst for social change. He insisted that the physical environment could mold the lives of its inhabitants, fostering community and cohesion. Pruitt-Igoe was conceptualized as a utopian response to the disarray of post-war urban America, where slum conditions plagued the lives of many African Americans. The project was meant to be a remedy for these social issues, a sanctuary designed to uplift its residents through modern conveniences and efficient layouts. Housing would include features like open floor plans, shared recreational areas, and beautiful landscaping that encouraged interaction, not just among residents, but between the complex and the broader neighborhood. However, the very ideals that inspired the project would soon clash violently with the gritty reality of urban life in America. Tragedy unfolded in Pruitt-Igoe as the hopes pinned on this modernist housing solution quickly began to fray. By the mid-1960s, the once promising complex deteriorated, plagued by neglect, crime, and political indifference. The vision that came to life in the drawings and plans slowly crumbled alongside the buildings that housed thousands. What had been heralded as a beacon of urban renewal instead became a haunting symbol of the failures of public housing and modernist architecture. As we delve deeper into the architectural failures of Pruitt-Igoe, it's crucial to recognize how systemic issues of race and class played an integral role in its downfall. The stark truth behind the demolition in 1972 signals more than just a failure of design. It exposes a disillusionment with the very tenets of the American dream. The residents of Pruitt-Igoe were not mere victims of poor policy, but were subjected to decades of socioeconomic marginalization that no amount of modern architecture could remedy. In essence, Pruitt-Igoe stands as a poignant reminder that architecture is inextricably linked to the experiences of those who inhabit it. It's a cautionary tale about how architectural aspirations, when disconnected from the realities of their intended users, can lead to devastation instead of resurrection. As we continue this exploration, we'll unravel not only the impact of Pruitt-Igoe on the lives of its residents, but also the lessons it imparts for today's urban planners and policymakers. The echoes of this project resonate in our current housing debates, challenging us to rethink the relationship between design, community, and the equitable access to a better life. Construction of the Pruitt-Igoe housing project began in 1954, a time when post-war America was embracing modernism and urban renewal. Designed by Minoru Yamasaki, Pruitt-Igoe was heralded as a groundbreaking solution to the housing crisis facing low-income families. The complex was completed in stages, with its first phase welcoming residents in 1956. By the time the project was fully realized in 1959, Pruitt-Igoe consisted of 33 buildings, each towering at 11 stories and housing around 2,870 families. The socio-economic landscape in St. Louis at this time played a significant role in Pruitt-Igoe's conception. The city was grappling with post-war population shifts, urban decay, and a burgeoning middle class that was increasingly retreating to the suburbs. Public housing was seen as a viable solution for the disproportionately low-income African American population that remained in the city. The hope was that Pruitt-Igoe would not only provide shelter, but also create a sense of community and uplift its residents through modern architecture and design. From the outset, the project embodied aspirations of modern living. The design included features like open green spaces, playgrounds, and community rooms intended to cultivate neighborly connections among residents. There was a palpable sense of excitement among the families moving in. Many saw Pruitt-Igoe as a chance to escape the cramped, dilapidated conditions of previous housing. The high-rise apartments offered well-planned living units with ample light and ventilation, a stark contrast to many other public housing options of the time. Initial reception from residents and urban planners was largely optimistic. The architectural community, influenced by the principles of modernism, praised Yamasaki's vision, believing that good design could foster social change. Residents felt a surge of hope that their living conditions would significantly improve. They embraced the modernist promise of a better life. However, this initial enthusiasm did not last long. As the 1960s progressed, the very factors that contributed to Pruitt-Igoe's initial allure also began to highlight its shortcomings. The project was soon overburdened by issues ranging from inadequate maintenance and rising crime rates to societal neglect. The shift from optimism to despair unfolded rapidly. By the mid-1960s, residents voiced their concerns about deteriorating conditions, and many felt trapped in a system that had failed to deliver on its promises. The demographic reality of St. Louis began to change as white flight to the suburbs accelerated. Pruitt-Igoe became increasingly isolated, further deteriorating as community support fizzled out. The architect's vision of a vibrant community was shattered by economic and social factors beyond its control. This spiral into decline raised urgent questions. What happens when an architectural ideal meets the harsh realities of urban life? This narrative of aspirations clashing with lived experiences informs the legacy of Pruitt-Igoe. The project stands as a poignant reminder of the pitfalls of urban planning that overlooks the social dimensions of housing. While Yamasaki's designs aspire to create a bright future for its residents, the reality was far bleaker, leading to a profound disillusionment that resonates in contemporary discussions about public housing and urban inequality. As we delve deeper into the decline of the Pruitt-Igoe housing project, it is crucial to understand the economic realities that began to shape life within its walls. By the late 1960s and early 70s, funding cuts drastically affected public housing programs across the United States. The once promising financial support that had helped create Pruitt-Igoe began to dwindle, shedding light on a chilling trend. As financial backing faded, so too did the quality of life for its residents. This economic downturn didn't just starve the buildings of essential repairs, it also contributed to broader social issues. With a growing reliance on inadequate welfare systems, poverty became entrenched in the community. The disinvestment in neighborhoods surrounding Pruitt-Igoe fueled a sense of hopelessness. Families that had initially seen the project as a pathway to a better life were increasingly trapped in a cycle of poverty and despair. Alongside these economic factors loomed the specter of crime. Initially, the high-rise design of Pruitt-Igoe aimed to foster community interaction, but as conditions deteriorated, the very architecture that was meant to create spaces for connection instead became a breeding ground for violence. Limited resources and inadequate security contributed to rising concerns, too often resulting in tragic incidents that left residents feeling unsafe in their own homes. The statistical spike in crime rates further stigmatized Pruitt-Igoe, reinforcing negative stereotypes tied to urban public housing. Yet, even amid social disintegration, racial politics played a pivotal role in the narrative of Pruitt-Igoe. As the African American population in St. Louis faced systemic discrimination and segregated neighborhoods, the project, despite its original intent, became a symbol of racial inequity. Residents were subject to the challenges of living in a society that often marginalized their existence. The pervasive attitudes surrounding race fueled neglect and apathy among policymakers who were less inclined to invest in or support the community that Pruitt-Igoe housed. The connection between the decline of public investment and the racial climate of the time cannot be overstated. They intertwined to create an environment where the hopes of so many were dashed against the hard reality of systemic barriers. As neglect deepened, maintenance issues became more than a mere inconvenience. They represented an institutional failure to provide basic living standards. Elevators broke down, plumbing became unreliable, and common areas once intended for community engagement fell victim to graffiti and litter. What was once designed as a vibrant public space evolved into a symbol of neglect and despair. The iconic structures that were meant to serve as homes instead became a haunting illustration of architectural idealism meeting the harsh realities of urban life. Pruitt-Igoe, emblematic of the great American dream of the 1950s, transformed into a narrative of disillusionment that reflected deeper societal fractures. It stands as a warning, one that resonates through the decades, of what can happen when economic neglect, social issues, and racial politics create a perfect storm. The dream of housing designed for connectivity and community ultimately gave way to isolation and despair. Understanding this backdrop is essential as we continue to unpack the legacy of Pruitt-Igoe and its lessons for urban development today. By the early 1970s, the situation at Pruitt-Igoe had become untenable. As the city of St. Louis and its leadership faced insurmountable pressures, they made the decision to demolish the housing project. The phased demolition process began in 1972, marking the end of an era. Using dynamite and cranes, the once promising structures were systematically reduced to rubble, leaving behind a haunting memory of what had been. Some residents watched in disbelief, while others could only sigh in relief, a complex blend of grief and liberation. Public and media reactions to the demolition were polarized. For many, it was a stark representation of government failure, an iconic example of how well-intentioned policies can go awry. Headlines blasted with phrases like, "The end of an urban dream," highlighting the project as a case study in the broader narrative of public housing. Critics pointed to Pruitt-Igoe's collapse as proof that such ambitious social housing programs could never succeed, while advocates used the moment to call for deeper scrutiny of the systemic inequities that led to such disasters. During the demolition, the media portrayed Pruitt-Igoe less as a community with its own distinct stories and more as a cautionary tale. There was little discussion about the individual lives that were uprooted and the legacies of families that had tried to create homes in the high-rises. Instead, the emphasis was heavily placed on the architectural failures and the social issues that had mingled within its walls. Urban planners and civic leaders took note, analyzing what went wrong in an effort to inform future housing developments. But Pruitt-Igoe wasn't just a failure. It became a pivotal reference point in urban planning discussions. Architects and sociologists debated the ramifications of its design. Minoru Yamasaki's vision of open spaces and communal living was scrutinized in light of real-world experiences, where those features did not lead to the envisioned community bonds. Instead, infrastructure designed to uplift became a backdrop of isolation and struggle. The discussions initiated by Pruitt-Igoe's downfall opened up critical dialogues about race, class, and urban development that continue to resonate today. While some were quick to blame the residents for the failures of the project, others recognized the compounding effects of poverty, discrimination, and neglect at the hands of the city and federal government. The project stands today as an indictment of a system that often sacrifices the needs of the marginalized for the sake of misguided urban renewal. In reflecting on Pruitt-Igoe's legacy, it becomes apparent that this stark chapter in American history reminds us of the ongoing battles surrounding equitable housing and the pursuit of the American dream. While the structures may have been erased, the conversations around housing inequality and the impact of design on community lives remain very much alive. To this day, as cities grapple with affordable housing crises, Pruitt-Igoe continues to serve as a poignant reminder that architecture must prioritize the humanity within its walls or risk repeating the mistakes of the past. The lesson is clear. Building community transcends concrete and steel. It demands understanding, empathy, and respect for every individual's right to a home.